Streaming through the digital night, Jim Bustle, he's guiding the light, unveiling mysteries of the unknown, UFOs in the alien zone. He's a man on a mission.
Oh, this one's fire, goddamn. Oh shit. What's up, everybody?
With his loyal crew, cosmic conversations, unveiling the truth.
Oh, this is a minute long. Shit, it's like Fast and Furious Aliens edition. Just need Papa Van in the background. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Well, probably. They're only like a minute long, though. So, yeah, I could just loop them. It's also kind of like the same lyrics, I think. But, yeah, Saxo, Divinormus did them. So you can contact him. It's $20 a song. Whenever he set the figure at. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode. I'm going to get some other music in the background here. Don't ruin the vibe. Yeah. We'll try not to, you know. Thank you everybody for coming around once again. Thank you everyone for watching these VODs, by the way. People still watching the VODs. My God. I'm so surprised. Not many people on here hanging out right now this evening, but for people watching the VOD, thank you. If you haven't followed, please consider giving me a follow. I'm at 270 now. Jesus, I'm finally climbing up again after falling down. So, trying to get to 300. Special surprise at 300. That's what I think we've decided. So who knows? Me and Galen TV are going to do a calendar. So that's going to be the fucking 300 surprise. Yeah. Let's get into this evening. We'll talk about big toes. Not like your big toe, but big theories of everything, which were all the rage a couple years ago, but they're starting to kind of make a comeback again. So I thought I'd talk about that. Tom Campbell, someone who had a big toe that I especially enjoyed. The woo is real. Stanton Friedman's effects still felt. Wanted to read over. Hendrix has been posting these brilliant clippings of like magazines / I think like newspaper articles from the 70s and late 60s, and I've been reading them. They're awesome, and I wanted to go over one of them here today. I've gone over one of them before, but it pertains to Stanton Friedman and a lecture he gave, and just crazy stuff, man. And then Alex Jones is a martyr. I don't know. I just have a love-hate with Alex. I love him as a meme, but like I run into him and I just like, fuck, man, like. And then the Wild Files, which hasn't been on for a couple weeks, is gonna be on. So I thought, hey, I might as well mooch off that and hang out. Yes. Anyway, we'll get into it here. Why not? Why not? I'm always watching the VODs. Timeline's killing me. Oh, thank you, Zach. I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate everyone who's following along. These VODs are now on YouTube. Fuck, typically on my days off, I upload them because I get up at 6 a.m. and I literally don't sit down until right now, which is 8:30 p.m. So, yeah, but I will upload the rest of the VODs on YouTube, and you can check out clips of some stuff as well on there. So I plan to post some other content on there, IRL stuff. I've got some ideas going, so theory crafting, you know. The Hecklefish, yes. Terrain Beast and HFX pins. Lovely gift. Started off with hate, but then slowly started to grow on people. So, yeah, there we go. Progress finally. I'm slowly but surely trying to get this properly off the ground. Just trying to think about what I can do for other content. I feel like Instagram is where I was posting food and stuff, and I don't know what YouTube's going to be. We'll see. I was thinking IRL type stuff, honestly. Going out and trying to find aliens. Going to alien conferences, maybe that'd be kind of fucking funny. I don't know. Oh my! Welcome to Enormous. Well, for my luggage, oh, where were you at now, Train Beast? You're traveling around, are you? Yes, it does look good. I'll get into that here a little bit later. But yes, where are we here? Oh, fuck this. I saw this. Oh, you're in Florida. Oh my God. Look at you go. Look at you flying around. Oh my God. Very nice. Very nice. Hopefully you get some orange juice. Man, I thought this was such a fucking head trip. I was watching this morning. Like, North Korea is just this strange social experiment. Like, just crazy. Like a huge meme. Like, fucked. Not really funny, honestly, how fucked it is there. Like, behind the scenes, like human trafficking and drug trafficking stuff. But, like, on the surface, entertainingly fucked. They worship him as a god. Although, I don't... But do they believe that, though? It's interesting, like, the psychology of it all. It's crazy, man. It's just crazy shit. Like... God damn it. It just makes me think of like mass formation psychosis, honestly. You know, people kind of just becoming enamored with a thing and then obsessing over it and just falling in line one after the other over it. In this case, it's Kim Jong-un. I miss the days of Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il was more of a meme. His son isn't quite as exciting. He's kind of more lame.
For the rest of the world...
Oh God, yeah, I don't want to listen to it. That's not wanting to die because you didn't wave by. Fuck. I don't know though, man. I might disagree with that.
It's a surreal...
Because, like, you know, I think now, like, many of these people since birth have been told that they're gods or something. I don't know. Very fucking strange to not to get in jail. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very strange thing. I don't want to go into that right this fucking second. This is interesting. Something like Digi posted. Archaeologists discover ancient tablet with Pythagorean theorem on it, but it's dated 1,000 years before Pythagoras. So I don't think this is a new thing, if I recall correctly. And there was a lot of speculation as to, you know, where Pythagoras may have got some of these mathematics from. He spent an extensive amount of time in Egypt, and the Greeks, many Greek philosophers, would venture to Egypt to speak with the priests here, because the Egyptian priests were far more knowledgeable than any of the other wise people in that area at the time. They had records supposedly going back 10,000, 9,000, 10,000 years. Yeah, originality, what a concept. Yeah, just hijacked it and then, you know, brought it over to the Greek world, to the Mediterranean, I guess. So, not surprising then that it comes out of Mesopotamia. Surprise, again, you know, and maybe we should say, but that, you know, again, originally these concepts came out of Mesopotamia. Right? Now, Egypt is potentially equally as old, but we know this. I was going to mention to this aside, I always put in here that Plato's mention of his uncle Solon, who went to Egypt, like it would have been 2500 BC or something like that, or would have been like 2600, 2700, something like that. And the priest in Plato's dialogue, he's mentioned both in the Critias and the Timaeus, spoke about how long the records go back and that they stretch back to just about the end of this mysterious civilization that he mentions called Atlantis. And then maybe that's where all this shit came from, ultimately, right? Like these mathematics. That's deep speculation, but not particularly surprising considering that when you go back to Egypt and Mesopotamia, both civilizations were started by the gods. Both of them. And actually Egypt is interesting. They make direct reference. Well, I mean, the Sumerians with the Anunnaki mentioned that as well, that they physically were on the planet with them. But the Egyptians speak of a time called Zep Tepi, which means the time before, where their god pantheon also walked the earth with people and taught them of their sacred forbidden knowledge. And then maybe over time this stuff got kind of carried down. And anyway, you do see this stuff embedded within some of the megalithic architecture too, which is something that needs to be pointed out. Specifically, the Giza Plateau, those pyramids are implementing some very interesting geometry, and people who are interested in geometry and alternative ancient history and geomythology, stuff like that. Randall Carlson is someone who is a geomythologist. Fuck, it's something like that. But there's some interesting number games you can play with the pyramid itself, and the math involved in the pyramid to get some very interesting results. You could get the diameter of the Earth. You could get some strange shit, and it isn't like out there number games. It's been criticized by some as being like out there number games. I can't see it. It's far too specific. Even where the pyramid sits, I think it's latitude, I believe, where it sits in an area actually that equals exactly the speed of light. So like the corresponding latitude to the speed of light, the number, which is just fucking very strange. I would argue probably an impossible coincidence. Yeah. Geomethodist. Geomethadome. Who knows? Yeah. These guys were all into drugs, so maybe. I thought this was interesting though. There was another aside to this that I thought was kind of cool, which was just last year. I think I saw this, but I haven't brought it up. 4,500-year-old Sumerian queen tomb found in Iraq may be related to Anunnaki. So this is interesting in that we're still finding stuff out about these ancient cultures. And it's something like I remember when I was younger, I had this idea that everything's been figured out. And our civilization has been really bad at that. In that we communicate to people, especially people who are experts, in a way that kind of maybe props up how much like these people know, like how much we know as a civilization. It makes us feel, because we do know a lot, we've figured out a lot, but it makes other people, it makes me feel like, okay, well, they must have figured everything, they must have found everything to do with the civilization. You find out actually that there's a lot of holes in a lot of theories, and that there's a lot of shit we don't know. And the area of Mesopotamia now, which is in Iraq, is very mysterious for a couple reasons. One is that it became a massive war zone, and that kind of prevented us from going back in and properly sifting through stuff. But it's also just a vast area that's had a long history going back, 6,500 years, like minimum, really. I mean, that's then they put that technically as the date, but I mean, again, carbon dating these stone fucking works is very sketchy, and I don't know. What did they find early 2000s? That's a good question. Did they find something early 2000s? I mean, they found a bunch of stuff there. They found periodically they find more and more of like these cylinder seals. What happened in the early 2000s too was during the Iraq War. And this has also happened periodically, but the museums have been looted. Things have been destroyed very recently, actually, in like 2021. The big museum in Iraq that housed a lot of this stuff was completely destroyed, which was very tragic. A lot of relics were lost and destroyed by what are those fucking idiots are called over there? The terrorist group. Just trying to, and that's the other thing too about going through ancient history that's very disturbing. It's a trend you see, but like dominant cultures will destroy all evidence of older cultures that don't align with their belief systems and their gods. So like, how much have we lost from that stupidity, right? Of like people ruling, and Mesopotamia has had many different like power structures as it evolved. That is Sumeria, out of the Assyrians, Babylonians, like the Akkadians, like there's been many different civilizations that have cropped up. So over time, you know, there's definitely probably been some sacking and destroying, and it further complicates things, and it's very unfortunate. Yeah, it's just stupidity. But anyway, There's some fucking stupid people on the planet. Okay, in the late 1920s, British archaeologist Leonard Woolley discovered the most lavish Mesopotamian tomb that had ever been unearthed. The tomb was located deep within the desert of southern Iraq. The skeleton, which dated back 4,500 years, was covered in gold and valued stones. The royal skeleton was found beside 3 other bodies, which most likely belonged to servants. However, the fact that this tomb was made for a woman was the primary factor that caused the discovery to send shockwaves throughout the world at the turn of the 20th century. Adjust the music slightly. There we go. Queen Puabi, whose name has been passed down through the ages because of a lapis lazuli stamp affixed to her burial robe, lived at the height of Ur's dominance around 2600 BC. During her reign, the ancient city dominated the Sumerian territory between the Tigris and Euphrates. Trade flourished in Ur, and trade routes reached from India to modern-day Sudan. Ur became extremely wealthy due to its role as a principal port for the shipment of products from India. Even though there are no historical texts that mention Puabi, many historians believe she may have been a ruler in her own right through the fact that her seal does not mention a husband. Girl power. Her tomb was discovered with a golden headpiece with elaborately crafted leaves and standing flowers was worn, and each finger on the wearer's hand was adorned with a golden ring, a golden belt with golden hoops wrapped around the wearer's waist. Holy shit. What's reference some people might not get now. Oh, Austin. No, god damn it. Oh, this guy. That was great. I've read people decked out in gold and Goldfinger. Yeah. Gold member. Gold member. Right. He was gold member. Right. I remember this. Yeah. That is no joke though. They obsessed over gold though. All the Mesopotamian, well, a lot of people on planet Earth did actually. Which is, a bit of it's a very unique metal though. Like if you're to find that metal in large quantities, you would look at it and probably think of it as sacred. Like it looks sick. Of all the metals you can find, like unrefined, it looks really cool. It looks really special, right? Like, so you could probably make that argument that it just looked cool, but in many of these different ancient cultures, they revered it because the gods revered it. And specifically, the Sumerians, the Maya and the Aztec mention this as well, which is also interesting, but that the gods revered the gold. Like they wanted and needed gold. They mined gold. They created in Sumerian creation stories of us. The gods manufactured us in their image, right? Out of clay and whatnot, to help them collect gold. There was an obsession with gold. So it's it is strange. And of course you got like Eric Von Daniken and co, right, coming in and saying, well, we use gold in circuit boards. It's like, what? Yes, we do. And it's like, well, they must have had circuit boards, the aliens. It's like, well, I don't know about that, but technically speaking, right, the ETs, the extraterrestrial beings, which are what the Anunnaki are, were obsessed with gold. And there are strange, depictions of what might appear to be technology from some of these ancient cultures, even crafts, right? It's not just Sequoiamba. There are other depictions of very strange looking aerodynamically shaped things all over the world, not just in Central America. You can find these throughout Mesopotamia as well, not quite as prolific as the Quimby stuff from Central and Southern America, but yeah, just because it's rare now, how they figured out its value. Is that what you think, Zach? Do you think that it was the aliens that did it, or I don't know? It's I mean, and that's the thing too. It wasn't. I guess it's not particularly abundant, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, some areas it was very abundant too, though. Now we know objectively there isn't a whole lot on the planet, but in these areas there was quite a bit of it, at least at that time. According to Wright, elite women in ancient Ur were linked to rulers in some way. They were the king's sisters or other relatives, or they were their wives. And these women were really important because they moved around the country as state representatives performing a number of things. As a result, they wielded considerable power. Conductivity, true. Earth, minerals, mine from afar. Take me to your jeweler. Fuck yeah. Puabi was almost certainly a member of the royal family and the king's wife. She passed away prior to the years 2400 to 2350 BC. Like Puabi, most women of privilege served as ambassadors for their husbands and thus representatives of the state. They did this by traveling. They would engage in rituals. They would go to a village or town, another city, and they would have a banquet. At this banquet, people would come and see the way the woman looked, the kinds of clothing they wore, sit right. Oh, shit, I thought that was her. I was like, what the fuck? Too much. There's like gold radioactive or something. In the 1920s and 1930s, her remains were unearthed in Egypt alongside Tutankhamun. It was a 20th century breakthrough. Puabi's remains, especially her horribly injured cranium, are in London's Natural History Museum. Oh, no. Interesting. It also contained around 1,800 other tombs. Wow. Bunch of highly regarded grave goods. Here we are. Queen Puabi seated with attendants. Interesting. That is a cylinder seal right there, actually. His excavation was shared between the British Museum, the University of Pennsylvania, and National Museum in Baghdad. Some treasure was stolen in 2003 after the Gulf War. God damn it. Yeah. Oh, Finn, welcome. Oh, nice. Hell yeah. Hell yeah, brother. Nothing like a good sausage. Oh, they're bringing up Sitchin. What? Jesus Christ. Zechariah Sitchin, an author, has devoted his entire life to unraveling and proposing an explanation for human origins involving ancient astronauts. A few months before he passed away, he had issued a challenge to the Natural History Museum, demanding that DNA testing to be performed on the skeletal remains of the Sumerian queen Puabi. He was willing to stake everything he had written about ancient astronauts on the DNA test. Sitchin claimed the remains of a high-ranking Sumerian woman could contain the genomes of gods and demigods, something he had been discussing since the 1970s. The remains were discovered in Iraq. In addition, it may have proved evidence that the Anunnaki gods, who were described in ancient Sumerian books and tablets, were responsible for altering human DNA. Sitchin suggested Puabi was an ancient demigod who shared a genetic connection with the Anunnaki. There are many examples of beings who had supernatural strength, intelligence, good health, and longevity in the ancient texts. These beings are described as living for a very long time. Sitchin postulated that a creator, whoever he or she may be, purposely constrained the extent of our capabilities. He believed that Puabi's remains would contain the answers to a missing genetic link in human evolution and wanted scientists to test the DNA of Puabi because he believed the answers would be contained in her remains. Maybe comparing her genome with ours, we would find out what are those missing genes that they deliberately did not give us. I can guarantee that, but maybe. I cannot guarantee that. Sitchin said in an interview with NBC News in 2010, that is why he urged the museum to conduct a DNA study of Puabi's remains. The Natural History Museum responded by stating that they would only consider his request if it came from a researcher with recognized experience and skills in this field or with access to the necessary facilities required to undertake ancient DNA analysis. Fair enough. Sitchin staked his entire existence in the result of DNA testing purportedly conducted on Queen Puabi's remains. Regrettably, following his passing, things went back to normal because nobody bothered to fulfill his desire. Fuckers, right? But that's, you know. Oh, so Zechariah also was of the spin that these people, the Anunnaki, were not, they were human, but they're a different group of humans. They were very tall, very large people. Sitchin thought they lived for a ridiculously long time, which was just some kind of weird, naive assumption. So just explain it quickly. In the British Museum, I've gone over this before because I've read through Sitchin's Earth Chronicles. I've gone over a couple of his books multiple times. I reference him. He thought that they lived for like, I can tell you actually. So this, I'll kind of explain why I think it was naive for him to think this. So he thought that they lived for about 300,000 years. And he thought this because in his proposed planet in our solar system that they're from, right, Nibiru, which means in Sumerian, Mesopotamian in general, crossing, that one cycle of the planet was 3,600 years. So because for us, one cycle of the Earth is 1 year, that, well, if we live for 80 years and then they're similar to us and they live for around the same time, if 1 year takes 3,600 years, then they'll live for 300,000 years. Now that is pretty smooth when you really think about it, and it's like the lack of consultation with any other like biologist. It would be like, no, bud. Like it's like radiation. Like it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. Like if we went around, like in 2 years to go around, like we're still exposed to radiation. We're gonna fucking die. So one of those glaring problems with Sitchin. Now, again, there's a lot of them, but ultimately, still, I think contributed something to this discussion. Not very well respected among some academics. Some other academics thought the same, that, you know, he was out to lunch with a lot of stuff. Kind of like Von Daniken, Eric Von Daniken from Ancient Aliens, the guy who inspired Giorgio and Co. This guy. But, you know, where is he? Dan Eric. You know, like Eric would just blurt out, oh, must be an extraterrestrial, must be an alien. It's like, well, no. But, you know, he still was out researching and exploring the world. And he ended up, Eric famously worked with a lot of academics in Egypt, in India, because the Hindu creation story as well, which is kind of similar to the Mesopotamian one and the Egyptian one, speaks very specifically that the gods were literally on the planet with us. They were literally people here, right, that did metaphysical things and were from a metaphysical place still. And these academics in India worked with Von Daniken because they kind of agreed with him. And this is, you talk to people who are from India, who are kind of involved in maybe studying like the Hindu scriptures and the stories and the Bhagavad Gita and the stories of the gods there. They're pretty transparent that, you know, yeah, this sounds like ancient alien shit. Like, you know, you get the Vimanas. Like, it sounds like this lost civilization that was a little bit ahead of us technologically. And hence why they aligned themselves with Von Daniken and, you know, weren't dogmatic about it. As opposed to us here, or in the West, a little bit more dogmatic and closed-minded. And anyway, so they both contributed something. Remains very tall. Oop, I guess I'm not. That's true. Fuck. Yeah, I don't know if I get hit with those genes either, unfortunately. You know, they're the 7.5 to 8 foot tall genes, right? Like, Well, that's the thing. I wish that they would, right? Because it's another shot at Sitchin where, here it is here, yeah. It's another shot at Sitchin because this is one of the cylinder seals that he popularized, by the way, which is objectively fucking insane. And it's pretty simple why it's fucking insane. Because we didn't come to the conclusion here in our civilization that we're in a solar system until, what, the 1600s? Mid-1500s? Some people started to figure it out, right? That, like, you know, oh, we're orbiting the sun, right? Oh, right? So up until that point, we were just dumb. Like, we had no idea. We thought everything was revolving around us. Now, this depiction here, now you can get into an argument with art historians. I intended to do this when I was at the Louvre, but they all had a bunch of tour groups, and I wasn't going to walk up to them and be like, actually, this one here, no, that's not what that means, right? And I hadn't slept in like 48 hours, so. But this is pretty blatantly depicting here a fucking solar system. I mean, there's not a lot of ways you can cut this. And they're sitting down with, I think, Enki, right? Or is it Enlil? I don't fucking know. Anyway, one of them sitting down here giving them orders. But in the background, you've got a sun and a bunch of other orbs flying or going around it. I mean, and, you know, they were big into astronomy, too, the Sumerians. And there's people who speculate, and Sitchin has speculated this as well, that they may have even named the outer planets that we couldn't see or didn't figure out were there until the 17 and 1800s, which is Uranus and Neptune. That's another thing that Sitchin had kind of contended, and another interesting insight of his, honestly, where there was an interpretation he had where they were naming the colors of the planets, but they didn't stop at Jupiter. They went on to Saturn and Uranus and Neptune, and they named them and gave them colors. So the name for Uranus and Neptune were corresponding to their color, the shade of color. And coincidentally, as we sent probes out there and got pictures of them, it matched up to their these depictions. So then Sitchin was like, well, they had to have been describing these planets. And you see these depictions here again that are very suspicious. Now, does that align with our solar system? Kind of, not really. It's hard to tell, right? So, but it does look like it clearly is a star, the sun, at the center of a bunch of orbs, which in that case would probably be planets. So then implying that they knew the sun was the center of the solar system, which 4,500 years ago is how old this cylinder seal is. So at least too, right? So that's fucking insane. And he deserves credit for that. And there's some even crazier bits of it. I've gone on this before about some of his interpretations in regards to. I'll just pull it up here. Where is it? It's this designation that they may have for Earth, which is very interesting. And you see it constantly plastered all over the place. So oh shit. Here's the one I always pull up, and it's kind of cut off here in the left hand corner. But it's these 7 dots you see right to the left of the sun here. And that the official explanation is people assumed, well, it's the 7 sisters, it's a Pleiades. But if you continue going through more of the cylinder seals and get a better idea of maybe what some of these artists, potentially the royalty, and maybe even depending how old these things actually are, maybe it was the Anunnaki themselves that made some of these cylinder seals. We're trying to convey. And he goes in depth with this in conveying that he's fairly convicted that the 7 dots represented the Earth, because you have more than one scene here where you see this gentleman here on the left holding in his one hand the 7 dots, in the left hand the crescent moon, implying, Sitchin argued, and I would have to agree, although you could probably argue against this, I'll devil's advocate here in a second, that 7 is representing the Earth. And it's very interesting because if you were to count in from Pluto, Earth is the 7th planet. And that's, again, crazy coincidence. And you have a guy over here to the right who's holding in his hand a 6-pointed star. And then again, if you were to look over from Earth, the next planet in line is Mars. And this is another area that in modern times, people who've been researching this schizo shit like myself, Mars is a contender possibly for some strange things happening. Potentially maybe involving, if this is all true, these people, if they're actually out there. And this gets into other schizo kind of stuff, which honestly isn't. Like the Phobos incident isn't schizo. That happened. And it involved a large cylindrical craft. And then Norman Berggren had wrote a book called Ringmakers of Saturn, where he was pretty convinced, and it wasn't just him, it was other engineers. And Norman was a PhD engineer who worked at NASA, like in the Skunk Works, in all these black programs. And he was convicted that there were these large cylindrical craft in the rings of Saturn as well. So potentially something going on in our solar system we're really cognitive of. But anyway, if for whatever reason that's true and they were here in the past, this may have been one way they communicated all this, which obviously out there, right? Obviously way out there. Evidence do we have that they named these planets? I'd have to pull it up, Naaman. So they didn't name the current naming the planets, but there was so what Sitchin would do typically is he would go through some of these creation stories out of Mesopotamia, and also some Hebrew creation stories, and he would kind of throw his own interpretations onto them. But one of the interpretations, I'd have to find the actual story, but they were naming. They were representing, and this is, I think, was one of the interpretations of some of the Mesopotamian anthropologists, archaeologists involved, was that they were corresponding some of the inner planets with colors, but it didn't stop just with the story kept going, and there were other names in there, like colors, that designated whatever the hell they're talking about, whatever myth and legend they were incorporating. And Sitchin thought that was interesting that they kept going. And then coincidentally, as they went out, right, Uranus and Neptune corresponded to the colors that they'd given them. It was something like, this is a bad paraphrase, but like swamp green and pale blue or something like that. And I forget what, again, I'm conflating. I'll need to pull this up here. But whichever one it corresponds to, both of those were named in succession. So similarly here, where you're seeing that coincidentally they have 7 dots potentially representing the Earth coming in from Pluto as the 7th planet, going out past Jupiter, Saturn, and then naming those last 2 planets and corresponding the colors to them is very, very intriguing. Again, some people might just write that off as just a random coincidence and that they were just memeing, but similarly with this, it's like that. It's a pretty big fucking coincidence, personally. And anyway, I just something that we should maybe consider, because again, in the stories themselves, if we're actually listening to the people who recounted them, these beings that are represented here were not from Earth, and they came down to Earth. So again, it's this conundrum we find with interpretations where, you know, sometimes these experts will attribute like extreme knowledge onto these people and like wisdom in constructing these megaliths, and like, well, they would have figured it out, right? Like they figured it. They didn't mention some of them that they built these crazy fucking megaliths, but they thought, well, they're smart. They figured it out. But then when recounting these stories of encounters with these beings, we instantly ascribe, oh, well, but they were primitive people. Like these were like sky beings. They just made this stuff up. And it's like, hold on. You can't have both here, right? So we have to just take a step back and, I would argue maybe this may be some literal thing that happened. And then also, I don't think they had a hand in this either. But if you're going to say that they were able to create these megalithic constructions, they're not idiots. And if they're speaking specifically about these entities and like engaging with them in some of the Hindu stories, I mean, come on now. We should take it a little bit more seriously. The problem is finding hard evidence of this. And this is where you start to get into conspiracy, honestly, with the bodies, to bring it back to Puabi here. Not this ad. No, I don't think she was a giant in her own right, but there have been a lot of reports over the years of these giant bodies, these giants through story, these giant bodies being found, and then the bodies kind of just disappearing. And I speculate probably disappearing into private collections. And then that further complicates things, obviously. Well, tend to assume. Well, that's the thing, though, too, Zach. So if that's true about Uranus and Neptune, and I recommend anybody listen. Sitchin, I like this documentary. His talks are a little bit dry, a little bit hard to get through some of his lectures. He's a very monotone guy. wasn't like a great orator. But I recommend you can check out some of his documentaries. Sorry, in the Forbidden Knowledge channel, I pinned them, and I'm just checking to make sure that they're still there. Actually, I think they are. They should be pinned right almost towards the top. Yeah, sorry, and they're not explicitly labeled either. They've just got those Wojak like special guy memes displaying in them because. But there's a 2-part document. There's a 2-part talk that he gives, and then the guy that has the plug being plugged into his own plug. That is a good documentary that details some of this information. That again, did everybody take it seriously? No, but the 2 astronomers who were involved in Planet X took it seriously. Who was Robert Harrington and Tom Van Flandern. They didn't necessarily agree with everything Sitchin said, especially in regards to the orbit of the planet they were looking for. But they thought it was pretty fucking interesting that he was very close. Like from studying like Hebrew scriptures and some Mesopotamian stories and interpreting them, he had the planet coming in and out of certain areas in biblical times, and their own Planet X had a similar trajectory. So Sitchin on his own came up with maybe an orbit that was a little bit too extreme, but it was very similar to what they ended up actually theorizing about using mathematics. And they were very surprised at that, I think. And that lended them to be like, hey, this guy's not an idiot. And this might sound out there, but there's something clearly to this. because for him to do this is fucking almost impossible. Very similar to Immanuel Velikovsky, who again wasn't a mathematician. He was a psychologist and a scholar, but he came to some very interesting conclusions that scientists later went and corroborated simply from going through some ancient literature. For instance, that Jupiter emitted radio noises, and the temperatures on Venus being wrong, when we, with all our great wisdom here, sorry, something in my throat, thought that it was temperate, and it turned out that it wasn't. And there were a couple other strange predictions he made too in regards to the moon and stuff on the moon. So both of them were brilliant in their own right, just unconventionally, I guess. And it's a shame that they were. Now, Sitchin, I could sometimes understand why he was lambasted a little bit more, because he didn't really use citations properly. But yeah, there you go. Fuck. Yeah. Looking for alien DNA. Yes, is dots in a cylinder seal known as represents the sun, moon, and 10 planets, including mysterious world known as Nibiru. It's on NBC News, huh? Was this passing, I guess? So this was close to his passing. He's willing to stake everything he's written about ancient alien astronauts on DNA tests. Could be performed in the 4,500-year-old remains of a high-ranking Sumerian woman. Interesting. Oh, they call him a fringe celebrity, right? Yes. And they link him with Eric von Daniken as well. You've been roundly scorned by the scientific community. Now, again, like, and the same thing happened with Velikovsky as well. He wasn't a scientist. Sitchin says there were giants upon the earth. Will be his last book. Yes, and that was his whole meme, that these gods were giants and these descendants were kind of spread out, scattered out around the world. After they kind of went native here. That's Sitchin's narrative. And I mean, who knows? It very well could be the case, in that maybe there weren't very many of them. That was kind of where he was coming from, that they descended from this other place and that they came here in small groups. And now in Sitchin's story and in the Sumerian creation myths, they made us. And whether that actually happened or not, who knows? Well, all of it, but within the confines of Sitchin's ideas here, they came in very small groups and they were kind of isolated from humanity. And then over time, what might have happened is they were stuck here and then they kind of ended up going native, and maybe they even lost their technology and they became nomadic and traveled around the world, very small groups of them. And then over time kind of just went extinct. And that was one of his ideas. So, and honestly, when you go through the records, this is the other thing again with Sitchin. He didn't really have a good knack for citing things. He wasn't a great orator, but he had this intuition that was very eerie, right? And I think that's what people had recognized in him. That's what I've kind of recognized in him, I think. When you go through this human story here, you do find accounts of people encountering these bands of giants. I've mentioned this before, but kind of in the ancient world, you find accounts. Even Plato makes reference to these areas of the world back then where you kind of stayed away from because you encountered giants. And it's like, wait, hold on. You have to like read that a second time. You're like, what the fuck did you say giants? Like, and you see reference to this all over the world. And through fantasy now, and Cyclops is one thing that they were kind of conflated with as well. That the Greeks had referenced a lot, but you find reference to this all over the planet. Literally every corner, which is interesting because stories of the gods interacting with man stretch to every corner in literally every culture, right? It could be the Inuits, right, in North America. It can be the Hopi in the Southwest. It could be the Peruvians, right? It could be the Pacific Island people, right, mentioning encounters of giants, and in Asia as well, in Japan, right, the gods there that set their nation forward, described as very large people, everywhere, right, the UK, even in Africa, the Dogon too, the beings that came and enlightened them were giant people, right, and they still dress up on stilts to represent them. So, you know, It's just this continuous meme, and the amount of ignorance going on, I think, with some of these established communities of intellectuals, whether it's archaeology or anthropology, is just astounding. It's really confounding, actually, when you look at it all, that no one's properly looking at this. I would presume probably that they have in their spare time, but due to these idiotic established narratives, they're afraid to come out and like properly research this, which hopefully we see the end of here in this new age, right? Nordic myths, but even they had giants called trolls. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, and even their pantheon of gods too, Zach, right? Like Thor and Odin and Loki. They were like larger people. They were depicted as such, right? Like, and actually too, in Nordic, it's another thing too. The Nordic myths, they have the world serpent, right? Whatever the world serpent, I forget what the name was again. Jormungandr, that would destroy the world, and they'd have oh my god, what's it called again? They Ragnarok, which was this end of the world brought on by Jormungandr, I think. And it's another reference to like the serpents involved with the end of the world and firestorms and death and brimstone, and similar to like Satan in the New Testament, right? It's this great red dragon. This idea carried down from probably, and I do argue this, probably, let's say I would bet that it's to do with some kind of celestial object. And that celestial object is, in fact, intimately connected to these gods. And that's another important point that is kind of forgotten, which is, there it is right there, mentioned, there it is again, right in between them. But this is something that Sitchin had noticed, where again, was he the best scholar? No. Did he have an intuition like beyond most of the, yes, most of the people? Yeah. I really, like, he picked up on this, where a lot of people didn't pick up on it. Now, he didn't actually, he did mention this as like a comet planet at times, but that they're literally on this fucking object, which again, if we're going to be literal here, what does it imply? I mean, it implies that's where they're from. That's where they're living, right? And I gone over this before here, but I would bet, and you can make the argument from other sources, other ancient sources, that this object is more than likely representing a comet here, a large one. And the fact they're living upon it is very confounding. Did you see this? No. This is new, is it? Oh, there you go. Hot Jupiter. Seems like it's going very close around its sun. Yes. Has a tail, huh? Now, comets, as they come close to stars, end up producing this trail around them. Because, well, this is gaseous stuff burning off from this Jupiter like planet. But comets typically, as they come and encounter solar radiation, they end up wafting off a tail, but they can also waft off wings. So these comets end up looking like these winged things, right? Which is really, honestly, what this is very interesting. Yeah, read the article. We don't usually think of planets as having tails like comets, but sometimes they do. Earlier this month, researchers at the University of California said they found the giant hot Jupiter exoplanet has a tail of gas much longer than previously estimated. Comet tail is like 350,000 miles long. Holy shit. 7 times as long as the planet is wide. The tail is a result of its parent star burning off the planet's atmosphere. The scientists said this confirmation of an exoplanet with a tail will help them better understand how physics shape planets and help planets evolve. Interesting. But the size of Jupiter, 160 million light years from Earth. The tail escapes into space. Solar wind from the star, much like our own sun, solar wind modifies it into a comet-like tail. So, great aside there, Galen TV, just kind of further highlighting this point. Now, this is something, I had a conversation with a guy, sorry, oops, the thing was up there, just to show the actual, here it is here, moving around. Again, there it is, going around, apologies. I had a conversation with a guy from Hong Kong who wrote an article about this, actually. His name is Manho Chan. And he's an astrophysicist and a philosopher. So I had a little chat with him about that. I thought that was kind of interesting. He did his dissertation in logic, of course, math-based gentleman. But he wrote an article, co-authored an article. He did a paper too, talking about how it was looking for Planet 9. So we have this planet in our own solar system that we're currently trying to find that should mathematically be out there, right? And one of the ways he had postulated we could find it was looking for trash in its tail, because due to its extreme orbit, and its orbit is very elongated, that it should be trailing stuff behind it, like a comet, honestly. But because of its size, it could be trailing like literal moons behind it, like massive moons, possibly dozens of moons behind it. And because of these moons interacting gravitation with the planet, they could become heated up. And this heating of the moons may be one way to try and find this thing at the infrared. If it's cold. So we might not be able to find the planet itself, but if we're careful enough, we may be able to see the moons, the hot moons behind the object. And again, this is very interesting because, in some of these depictions at Mesopotamia, you do see this object here depicted with stuff swirling behind it. And I've mentioned this before, but this is the caduceus here, which is, I think, another representation of this object we just saw, which is what medical professionals currently wear around their lapel, on their lapel right now, which ended up being tied in with medicine through, I think, the Greeks at some point. But it originated in Mesopotamia and Sumeria. And this winged disc and this orb at the center with these snakes entwining around the back of it is something that it's implying something celestial, I think. And this is something that I sent all this stuff to Manho Chan, and he thought it was interesting. And that, again, we're looking at maybe like Velikovsky and potentially like Sitchin, another instance here of helping these math-based boys with maybe some ancient literature, in that this has already been figured out in the past by people. And we're just kind of rediscovering this stuff. But they were depicting this very specifically for this reason. And it's interesting as well. The cross is another interesting phenomena. I brought up this before, but again, who's that? Oh, someone knocked the door. This cross here, as you can see, rogue moons, it makes so much sense. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and well, if it's in the orbit that they've hypothesized that it's in, right? Mike Brown and Konstantin Batygin are the two astronomers at Caltech who have reinvigorated the search, right? It's a little bit different than Harrington's Planet X, but not a whole lot. It would make sense. Now, in regards to, let's say, this object started approaching us, right? Now, this is another, this is how specific this gets. It does get, I've said this before, but it will get to a point where it will start unnerving you, as it should. But you start to look through these cylinder seals, and Sitchin's, again, intuition on this was that this cross is representing this planet here. And there's a couple instances of this that I can highlight to show and possibly even prove, which might be a bit audacious to say, but that this is in fact this object here. And this gets very deep because we know the cross is a religious artifact, now a symbol, right? And its origins may in fact be celestial, which is very interesting. But you can see here, these are, the first one is an impression of a cylinder seal, and there's a petroglyph on the left, and then on the right is another impression that you see constantly around Mesopotamia. A lot of impressions. Actually, I think this particular impression is from some Akkadian scene that I actually saw at the Louvre when I was in France. Anyway, so this object here, this cross, now, Sitchin's Nibiru literally means cross in Sumerian. It means planet of the crossing is what he calls Nibiru. And it's called that, and this is another interesting interpretation from Sitchin that ended up correlating with the mathematical model of Planet X, was that our solar system isn't on a flat plane. So I could probably get a picture to better explain this, but our solar system actually isn't laying flat in line with the galaxy. It's tilted like this. So this planet, so here's what we think we are. Here's what our solar system's actually doing, which is very kind of strange. It's almost been knocked on its entire side. This object, this planet X, right, is still in line with kind of the plane of the universe, or sorry, the galaxy. It's not tilted. So what happens with Planet X, this was the original theory, it's still the theory with Planet 9, I might add, and it's what Sitchin had also hypothesized about in correlation with, in concert, right, with the Planet X theory, which is also why the guys started paying attention to him, that this object crosses the ecliptic plane. So what it does for us is it comes up through and goes back down. It comes up through and goes back down. Now, in actual fact, what's happening is we're tilted and it's laying on the actual like flat line and just going around. And so that was another reason why he called it Nibiru, as in crossing, is that in that the planet crossed our ecliptic plane, right? It crossed the ecliptic of our solar system. But the other interesting anomaly too is that it was depicted as a cross. And this is interesting, but some comets potentially could look like this as they approach us, especially from the sun, because due to how things are going to be dispersed off of them, and we've seen this with some comets that we've encountered, like Hale-Bopp is one, but that it can kind of look like this. So if this object was coming towards us, right, it might appear like a great red cross, and the red gets into some other little bit schizo stuff, but that the object is big enough that potentially it may pick up a lot of oxidized iron that it may encounter. And this is where things are really sketchy in the asteroid belt, which just means it comes that close. There's also oxidized iron probably in the Kuiper belt, among many other things that it could pick up. But Sitchin was convinced, and it was spoken about as being this red object. And we do have accounts of waters turning bitter red and undrinkable, and blood falling from the sky all over the planet. Anyway, in this, so Sitchin colored this all red. Yeah, convinced again. Uh-oh. So here you see, though, a cylinder seal. This is an impression of one, and I've seen the original one of this as well. But this is a scene here, and men are plowing their fields, implying that this is happening during the day, and they're pointing up and seeing in the sky this great red cross appear. Now, this is implying with this scene, this object is coming at us from towards the sun, and it's up in the sky approaching us. And now to correlate this object here that's appearing here, right? And I'll blow it up so everyone can see it here. This great red cross, you can see in the scene the gentleman turns around. They're all looking up at it as they plow their field, that it's approaching. And I'll correlate this to the winged disc we just went over here a second ago. In that in these cylinder seals, the artists were, hell-bent on making sure people knew what this actually was. Here we are again. Here it is. So there is this nimbus or andisc or flying disc, whatever you want to call it. I'll put this back up again. You can see it here again, depicted with the cross in the center of the wing disc. And here is the last one. Well, there's a fucking bunch of them actually. There isn't just one. But this is a very good one here, right? Here you go. This is on Nimrod, I think, on his little mural. But again, they have this winged disc with the cross within it. So this winged disc is this object, right, which is appearing in the sky, preceding some kind of issue as well, which we see time and again. There's another one I was going to show here that, oh yes, the actual red. And now this is where things get even a little bit crazy, right? This is where things get real crazy, actually, where you start to see in Egypt, what I think some of these academics have maybe conflated with the setting sun. It's not the sun. Here they've also colored it red, coincidentally. And you can see that it's very similar. And you see the wing disc itself with these two snakes coming off of it, as the Caduceus has the snakes entwining around it. This is the same object, I argue, here. Again, red, and again, this wing disc here. And in fact, you actually see this, you see the cross represented too, which is right there, you see. And this is where things get really crazy, okay? This is where we go to like a level 10 here, right? So now, look very carefully at this cross that is depicted here. So you can see it's a circle, right? It's a circle, right, with a cross and 4 dots on either side. Now, this is, again, I would argue, it's another depiction of this object, right? Now, this is in Egypt. So this is a pretty ancient relief of Ra, which I've mentioned many times, and the connection that Ra literally translates into Hebrew as, which is potentially evil red star, which some people would argue on that. But now I'll show you the Hopi Indians, right? Now, other side of the planet, right? Literal other side of the planet. Here's the Hopi Indians flag. There you go. I think they all witnessed something in the sky. Same object. And you've seen this object communicated not just in Native America or in Egypt, but you also see it communicated in Europe, which is a little bit different here, but very still similar. This is in Val Camonica, Italy. This is a very ancient relief, and you see this object pointing down to a gentleman here who looks like he's wearing a helmet. Very large nose, dancing around. But you can see here, now they've kind of scraped out one of those dots because they put an arrow pointing down to him. But you can see this object once again depicted here in Val Camonica, Italy. These are ancient petroglyphs in Italy. So again, once more, we see this object reoccurring. Now, again, all of this stuff is pretty compelling, honestly. I would argue this. And it's rooted in Sitchin. Zechariah is the one who really kind of dug all this stuff up initially and connected all of it. What was this? Oh, this is what I was looking for the other fucking day, goddammit. Right here. The people. Right. Showing the difference between the gods. The height difference. Here, look. Look, here. Put it down a little bit. Like, they weren't fucking around. Like, they were extremely specific. And they were consistently showing them as, like, the same height, time and again. So, I don't understand how we haven't got into this deeper yet. But here we are now, right? Not that I'm going to be the fucking guy to do it. I would rather have some archaeologist or anthropologist stick their neck out because, I do philosophy. I don't. This isn't necessarily my fucking expertise. I just, after reading through Sitchin, came to be like, oh, this is fucking interesting. And they went just out looking for stuff and said, what the fuck? I would admit, man, there'd be so many people that know this within these disciplines. Guys, you got to say something about this. And I know it's out there, and I know, like, you might be a little bit ostracized for saying it, but, like, you got to say something. Because, my bend on this is more to do with this object, honestly, than the anthropological stuff with, like, these giants. But, this is where I would definitely come into it, where I was involved with the Velikovsky's work a little bit more extensively, in Typhon, and looking through the Exodus story, and this object that is again depicted here once more as a Greek god called Typhon, red, again, I might add, once more here, and correlative to the waters turning bitter red and undrinkable during the Exodus, in that Velikovsky believed this object, had crossed paths with the earth, and that it wafted the earth with its oxidized iron and turned all the rivers and lakes bitter red and undrinkable, which is very interesting. And it's correlative to that. This is mentioned in history. Pliny the Elder mentions of Typhon. I'll shut the fuck up about this and go on to the next thing I was going to fucking talk about. But Pliny mentions this. I'm just going to try and put music on here in the background. Pliny the Elder, Typhon. Oh, man. Shut up, ads. Drive me nuts. So here we go. Where is it? Yes, here it is. So this is some stuff that I've been involved in kind of researching. So here we go. He's aware of comets. A terrible comet was seen by the people of Ethiopia and Egypt, to which Typhon, the king of that period, gave his name. It had a fiery appearance and was twisted like a coil. Sound familiar to anybody here? twisted like a coil. You see the snake legs on Typhon there, right? Twisted like a coil, like the caduceus, huh? And it was very grim to behold. It was not really a star so much as what might be called a ball of fire. Interesting. Pliny doesn't really give a date and time when this happened. Now, there was never any king called Typhon in Egypt. There's some semantic stuff some people have done to maybe try and correlate it to someone, but there's also some other semantic type stuff that someone may have done to correlate Typhon to a king that was ruling Egypt around 3,600 years ago, right? And there was a period of disruption in Egypt called the Hyksos invasion. For about 100 years, record keeping or more was disrupted in Egypt by these invaders from the north. And the entire event's very suspicious, honestly, in that these people who were kind of barbaric but nomadic just happened to invade Egypt one day out of nowhere, right? Like, and you know, this happened, and it was interesting in that potentially, it was interesting for a couple reasons. One, I would definitely try and argue that wasn't by accident that they did that. That potentially we have a story here in the Exodus that may have precipitated Egypt being very disoriented and weak, and that may have provided an opportunity for these invaders to come in and take control. And as this was going on, these invaders may have taken control. And it might explain why we have this story here by Pliny mentioning that this King Typhon, who was not in the Egyptian records, was associated with this great comet that appeared too. This comet that likely appeared, I would argue, during the Exodus, which also coincided with the Hyksos invaders coming in, and then this king taking control. There's some interpretations of one of the leaders' name of the Hyksos that may correlate to Typhon. So very interesting stuff, right? Like it's definitely, in terms of scholarly stuff, it's definitely schizo again. It's a little bit out there, but the correlative stuff too, that Sitchin was in the time period, was very interesting, because the Hyksos invasion happened roughly 3,600 years ago. And there was an eruption of the Thera volcano too around that time, around 3640, right? So we get this idea here that around 3,600 years ago, this invasion may have happened. There was an eruption of the Thera volcano. The Exodus is pegged at being like 3,200 years ago, but no one really knows when it happened. And it's interesting too that Sitchin himself had claimed the orbit of the planet was 3,600 years. And then we're 3,600 years ago, and we see this kind of mysterious narrative may appear, right? Which then is concerning for us now, right? If that's the case, right? I'm beaming here a bit here. I'll explain in a second. But if that's the case, then this happened 3,600 years ago. The planet's on a roughly 3,600 year orbit, right? And the Exodus was a cataclysm. What's in store for us now, right? What happens, right? It comes around again. Now, I've talked to people that know more than I do about this, about orbital mechanics, like Man Ho Chan, and I put this to him. I showed him some other pictures too. I said, bro, I just want your fucking opinion on this. just to make sure that this isn't possible. And in his opinion, and I've since done this with ChatGPT as well, which is actually a pretty good resource for a smooth brain like myself that doesn't know anything about orbital mechanics and astrophysics. But 3,600 year orbit for an object of this size is extremely unstable, and it would not find its way into an orbit like that. It may do that a couple times, but then it would fly off. So the 3,600 year orbit with an object as large as Planet 9 doesn't make any sense. So that may have put that to rest. So thank God. There's all knowing dimensional guy out there keeping report what the fuck happened on this planet. Yeah, me too, Zach. Well, listen, the alien stuff, right? Roswell. That's ufology. That was my coming back to fucking ufology moment with this stuff, right? Like, because I was interested in ufology when I was much younger, like a kid. As I got older, I got into kind of this stuff, and through philosophy, I kind of became acquainted with reading through some more scholarly works and papers, and I got into this kind of alternative side of things again, as I tend to do. But I came back to the whole are we alone thing, and are people, the other thing I came back to too is, well, are there visitors here, and are they actually talking to people maybe with the abduction phenomena? And they would be your resource that would be able to tell you definitively, especially if they've been here for thousands of years, what the fuck happens. It's time flying by already. I'm not scared. Yeah. Will Jan fuck? Yeah, man, I don't know. That could be, well, who knows? It would be an exciting experience. Not everybody dies in that story in the Exodus, right? They just wander for like fucking 70, 80 years and eat manna in the desert, which who knows what manna was, but yeah. Wizards in the desert eating manna. Yeah. But this I found this interesting. Where was the interview with the little clip of Bob? So this is something that Bob had mentioned, actually, which is why I find Bob's story so fascinating. Here we go.
By document dealing with religion, and it's about that thick. Period. But why would there be any classified material dealing with religion?
I want to go back to the religion thing. I want you to say it.
It's so far out.
All right, your objection has been noted.
Okay.
What does it say?
That we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That we are nothing but containers.
Containers of?
Containers. Maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers, and that's how we're mentioned in the documents. That religion was specifically created, so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers.
Interesting, huh? And that was a part of Bob's story that was extremely intriguing to me. In that, and he kind of goes onward from there, actually. Empty containers. He goes on from there and talks about that they had actually gone to the point where, like, the prophets purposely came here with that intention to try and set some rules and regulations to try to move civilization forward so that we could maybe end up in a more advanced civilization, right? Having like some tenets to keep people in line. And that they had aided these prophets, these visitors, in their mission here to do this. Like, again, this is like, and if Bob actually saw these documents and they weren't some kind of psyop by the government to test them, if this was actually, and now, this all lines up with some of the schizo-anecdotal stuff from ufology, I might add, and the abduction experience as well. In that in these experiences, the visitors tell them that, no, you're just here playing a game, kind of, right? You're in a simulation, right? Your soul, your consciousness, whatever. Same kind of thing, and it's all wooey. It's all spiritual shit. Most of almost all the encounters you hear about the abduction experience of these beings, if they actually get in conversation with them, has to do with this kind of stuff, and it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. And so maybe they are this repository of great knowledge. The other thing they talk about too is that we're going to encounter a cataclysm in our lifetime, which is a theme you run into too with some of these abductees. Is they either have an intuition or they've been outright told that at some point in our life we're going to encounter some kind of cataclysmic event, which is something that I had known growing up with this, hearing all the stories of people who were abductees saying this, and some of them who were driven insane by it actually as well, which is very sad. But I've gone over the account of one of those gentlemen actually, and that the visitors had instructed him to build a well in the middle of nowhere in anticipation at some point that it would be used by survivors after this cataclysmic event that would destroy the atmosphere and et cetera, et cetera. And he ended up going insane and dying. There have been a couple others too that have stated the same kind of thing. Nancy Leader is someone that I've mentioned here before, who is a contactee who I don't usually get into that because it's like full-blown schizo. But she's talked about how she's convinced she's been having visitations and telepathic communications with visitors her whole life, and they've been telling her this planet has arrived again, right, into the solar system. But it gets out into... There's a level of schizo even I won't contend with. And when you get into like Cartesian concepts of like deception, and it's just going to drive you nuts. She's convinced herself the planet's out there right now by Venus and the aliens are concealing it, so the global elite don't mow us all down. But considering what just happened, it seems like they might be doing that anyway. So I don't think Nancy's near. I think Nancy went insane. Maybe at one point, though, there was something to her story. I know her whole story, inside and out, actually. Again, with these schizo people, I don't just fuck around. Like, I learn everything about them. I know her entire history. Maybe at some point in her life, there was something that happened to her, but that's a theme you find as well with people that have unfortunately maybe had these encounters, is it drives them nuts. As it might, if, you know, monkeys in the woods encounter some great intellect or something, you know, but a little bit different. That's not really a good analogy because monkeys aren't particularly conscious to the degree that we are. Encountering something extremely advanced can be very disorienting. Maybe too much to handle. Yeah. A Jesus streamer on Twitch, not far from Mailing Jesus. Fuck yeah, there you go. Yeah, literally though, yeah. Fuck yeah. I know her life. I do know her life. I've talked with her actually via email. I've in the past, yeah. So anyway, whatever. Whatever. I do want to go over this article though. Let's see. This is so Hendrix graciously has been posting these awesome little newspaper clippings / like magazine clippings in regards to ufology. Like back in the 70s and the 60s, look at this stuff here. Like people smoking weed and stuff, and like, oh my god. So this is very interesting. Never mind the saucers. Did you see who's driving? This is by Angela Keys Douglas. This is in regards to Stanton Friedman. The reactions questions raised to Stanton Friedman's lecture at UC Berkeley's Zellerbach Auditorium April 12th were any indication, another group of oppressed people will be added to the long list of those seeking an end to discrimination. This was written in 1972, I think, by the way. However, they will definitely be classified as third worlders, although third world people were speaking out on their behalf. Or if Stanton Friedman has his way, we will all come to consider ourselves as members of the third world earthlings, inhabitants of the third planet from the sun. Nice. Nuclear physicist, aerospace researcher Friedman, ex-employee of GE Westinghouse, etc., research projects is lecturing on UFOs and their propulsion systems and feels that UFOs should be given a new name, EEMs, for Earth Excursion Modules. Before a near-capacity audience, Friedman systematically refuted U.S. Air Force contentions that UFOs did not exist and presented a great deal of data backing up his theories that UFOs not only exist, but are obviously extraterrestrial in origin. Of some interest was Friedman's contention that these beings aren't necessarily friendly. He feels there may be many different races visiting the planet for any number of reasons, and some might be good guys and others bad guys. Friedman also compared the Apollo modules to UFOs, saying that we are building spacecraft along the same general lines. Saying there are at least 50 companies that could produce a vehicle similar to the UFOs, which have been sighted and photographed, said Friedman, but not the propulsion systems. However, Friedman has released information concerning discoveries of Dr. Stuart Way at Santa Barbara, who has successfully created a 9-foot, 900-pound submarine which uses electromagnetic power for propulsion. Interesting. Friedman discussed UFO sightings, showed a number of slides, and also discussed interstellar travel, nuclear fusion, and fission devices. Misspelled fission. It may be that we're dealing with the Galactic Federation. Or something like that, replied Friedman to a question concerning contact with extraterrestrials. Obviously, in comparison to extra-Ts, we're a primitive society whose major activity is tribal warfare. We might even be a colony, he suggested. I mean, I thought that was so cool. And I've heard him say that before, but it was back in 1972. He was giving lectures, talking about this kind of stuff. Haim Eshed, famously, you know, the Israeli astronomer, had mentioned this recently, and he didn't speculate on it. He said, I know for a fact from inside information that we're being contacted by this Galactic Federation. So Stanton May got that fucking right. Back in 1972, a new generation will grow up familiar with UFOs and extraterrestrial life, he said, expressing hopes that attitudes regarding the existence of such life and UFOs will change for the better. If enough people have the guts, that's exactly right, we can hasten the day when it'll be accepted. People of Earth may get together and force their governments to take another look at the subject. Friedman also discussed radar defenses of UFOs and the fact that they have been sighted in many, many nations by all kinds of people. However, Friedman's discussion focused on data reported in non-communist nations. Similar to its programs regarding ESP, the USSR has also apparently taken a much more realistic attitude towards UFOs, as they were engaged in remote viewing then. Perhaps a point worth noting is that Friedman used male terminology exclusively in his discussions, obviously assuming that males control UFOs, and hasn't recognized the resemblance of a UFO to a mammary gland, which might lead one to assume that UFOs have been deployed along female principles, whereas Earth rocketry has been deployed along male principles. The reason extraterrestrials haven't contacted Earth people is simple, shouted a black male who created something of a disturbance during the question and answer session. Okay, we can't say that. Okay. Can't say that. Forgot it said that. Anyway. Jesus Christ. Holy fuck, bud. Some heavy stuff there. Anyway, you guys can read this in your own time. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Interesting. That was published in a fucking journal. Oh God, brilliant though, awesome. Yeah, thank you, Hendrix, again for posting all those. I've been reading through all of them. They're fucking awesome. The perspective is so unique, and in regards to Stanton stuff though, just hearing him at these talks, even back then. I mean, people back then were far less acquainted with these concepts, and he spoke with such logic, like true logic in regards to this, and true courage as well. And imagination, which is extremely important in trying to understand this problem. And it would have been so disorienting for people to hear somebody like that, accredited, like truly intelligent as well, that had legitimately thought through the entire thing logically, right? And recognized, in contrast to some of the denialist type people that are out there now screaming this isn't real, that, there's a level of anecdotal evidence that you reach where you have to start taking it seriously. And he did, way back then. And again, it's too bad we don't have him as a voice anymore, but there are many other voices out now that are trying to contend with this, like Dave Grushenko, who are picking up where he left off and kicking open the fucking door of secrecy. So he actually absolutely like a true wizard in regards to this stuff, my inspiration for getting involved with it as a kid. I just respected his logic even as a young boy. I could just see, I think a lot of people could tell in a conversation with other, just how much more grounded he was, and he just knew his shit. You felt secure, like listening to him. He was just a good teacher too, and a forward-thinking person. So anyway, yeah, it's fuck, man, it's interesting times. I was gonna say it's a bit of a letdown that it took that long. Like, he was speculating about this stuff then, and we still are right now. And that was 1972 was 52 years ago. Like, it's insane that we've been still going in circles around this for that long, and we're finally just starting to get out of the woods now. So Wiljan, yeah, man, I've tried in the past. I was going to see if a guy would help me do it. I'm gonna reach out to him again, but that'd be kind of a fun experiment on stream, actually. I've tried again, having not like much of an audience, messaging people or much of a following. A lot of people don't really take you seriously. But this is Tom Campbell. So Tom Campbell is the guy I was going to pull up here. We might not have time tonight because we're going to watch the Y-Files here in a second. But he was a physicist, and he's still a physicist. He's a nuclear physicist who has these kind of has this big toe theory of everything, and he's kind of in all this woo, right? And kind of the new age metaphysics that I kind of get into a little bit as well, with remote viewing and channeling and all of this stuff, and hypnotherapy, and so this was he's an interesting guy. He's a smart guy. I think he comes in pretty logically. Obviously, it's a pretty ungrounded place to be, but I think at the cutting edge, though. I think, yeah, Joker, yeah. Kurt's awesome. Kurt's really objective, and he's willing to listen to people with these kinds of perspectives and speculate on these kinds of things, which is really important. Because my own intuition is that I think this is possibly the future. I think this is more cutting edge, I think, than we might be giving it credit for. It's just so new, and it is still ungrounded. But remote viewing is something I found that to be very interesting. Yeah. Oh, did you? Oh, fuck yeah, man. Yeah. It's I'd be curious to try that stuff. I mean, John is someone that I was having brief correspondence with, who is a professional remote viewer. I think he was he behind Third Eye Spy? No, maybe not. I thought he did have some hand in that, but he has a remote viewing channel called Right Hemispheric that's very interesting. And John was trained by the guys who came out of the CIA. So back in the early 90s. So John is an interesting dude. He's a fairly well-known remote viewer. He had worked for a bunch of startups doing remote viewing think tanks. He'd famously been hired by the FBI after 9/11 to try and remote view Osama bin Laden. More specifically, his remote viewing think tank was, and he was one of these psychic spies that they hired to try and find these terrorists. And I don't know, they obviously didn't actually end up really finding him, but maybe give him some ideas. But so he's an interesting character, and I had some correspondence with some remote viewing he did about the whole virus thing that I thought was very unsettling. But anyway, I might reach out to John. Maybe John would want to come on and just have a chat, try and teach me how to remote view. I'll pay you, John. I'll pay you, bud. We'll throw you some Prime subs or something. I don't know, but that'd be kind of fun to do. Have someone who actually knows what they're doing. Like he runs remote viewing teams and stuff, and you know, obviously it's woo, and I've seen some interviews with John too, and he's fairly transparent on the whole phenomena, right? Some of these people are very they're a little bit too into it. Like John seems to be pretty objective about it and honest about it. I think he'd be a fun guy to talk to, and John's obsessed with giants and the whole Planet X thing. So there you go. We can talk about that too, bud. Maybe I'll shoot John an email tomorrow morning. Maybe again, he ignored me. I was trying to pester him to do remote viewing for me, and he wanted to do it because we were interested in the same things. But alas, maybe reality hit, and you know, you just can't do too many things for free for people. So anyway, oh Jesus Christ, yeah, okay. Sean Ryan Pond. I haven't heard of Sean Ryan. Okay, interesting, man. Yeah, interesting. Asking you if you've seen that or Above Majestic. The Cosmics. I think I've seen. I've seen Wilgen both. So the Cosmic. I'm just pulling them up to make sure that I. Okay. No, I've not seen the Cosmic Secret, but I see David Wilcock's forehead in there. So. Above Majestic, I've definitely seen. Yeah, these are both David's works, I believe. Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of David, but David gets into this stuff. I have seen Above Majestic. I have not seen the other one. Sorry, I thought it was another one. Yeah. Yeah. Watch for All Mankind. It's an alternative timeline in which Soviets land on the moon first and Cold War continues in space. Oh, that's kind of cool, huh? Fuck yeah. Yeah, I could have, maybe then we questioned these and that. Interesting, yeah. The whole remote viewing thing, I mentioned this, me and Drunk Physics were talking about this kind of behind the scenes the other day. Some interesting stuff behind the scenes, actually. Third Eye Spies is a pretty great documentary just highlighting the whole journey of remote viewing in the United States. And who was behind it, how well it fared, why it got shut down. Pretty transparent. I guess it was Russell Targ behind this. Oh, this is a book that he wrote. Okay. So Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff are both physicists, and they got into this through Ingo Swann, who was a psychic. And fascinating story. Fascinating documentary. Highly recommend anyone watch it. I've gone over as well some of the subsequent remote viewers I thought were very interesting, like Joseph McMuneagle. And I've gone over here many times, which I'm not going to do again because we're going to watch Y-Files in a second. I've gone over this remote viewing of Mars on the CIA's website, which is extremely correlative to the whole narrative I just went over about another planet in our solar system that has this large group of humans on it. Crazy shit. So, there's maybe there's an explanation for this, but it's pretty fucked, honestly. So, and you can go, it's still on the CIA's website. So there you go. Yeah. Yes. Oh, Joker. Yes. Yeah. Oh, nice. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. That remote viewing, yes, here is by Joseph McMoneagle. The other night I didn't get to it, but I was going to watch Joe breaking down this remote viewing. Actually, there's a video of him going through it, and explaining what he saw and whatnot. But this is a remote viewing that Joseph did. The coordinates given to Joseph and SRI at the time, or maybe in the Monroe Institute at that time, they were given to him by the U.S. Navy. So the U.S. Navy gave these remote viewing boys this letter, and inside the letter, they wanted him to remote view Mars 1 million years ago. And more specifically, they wanted him to remote view the Cydonia region of Mars, which in the 80s and mid-70s was a topic of hot discussion because they thought they had found a face and remnants of pyramids there. So, here's your taxes. Yeah. Yes, I think it's, Bilgin, and Joker too. Yeah, it's very, if you look into the alien lizard being people encounter remote viewing, I've heard tell of these beings. A friend of mine, or are you in here, DM Leak? has his own stories of this. I'm not going to tell his story because I don't know if he wants to tell it, but I've known of people who have had their own encounters with things like that, I guess, in one way or another, whether it's through remote viewing or if it's through people doing like lucid dreaming and things of that nature. They've run into things like that, like they'll try and do lucid dreaming and they'll end up doing something strange like astral projecting. All this stuff is woo, but listen, I've had an experience like that myself when I was a kid. So as strange as I think it may be, it happened to me when I was a kid, and I saw myself in great detail as a kid. And this has happened to some people. And while in that state, they encountered entities like that. Yeah. Which is strange. Absolutely strange. But then, in ufology, there's many mentions of entities that are reptilian in nature, right? So, oh, you did. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Joker. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Xenon. Yeah, that's John Brandenburg. He's a physicist in Florida. I think he's still a professor at the University of Florida. But he had this book called War and Death on Mars, I think is what it was called. But it was to do with these levels of xenon in its atmosphere were confounding, and that there's really only one explanation, maybe two now, but one of them is to do with the detonation of nuclear weapons. So that one still hasn't been completely explained, actually. So very interesting. There were stories in the past of the gods playing around with great weapons of destruction. We're talking about the Bhagavad Gita, but some Hindu stories of these great weapons of destruction being set off by the gods. And we do have some sites on Earth that are kind of strange, which do appear to have potentially remnants of radiation. And stories, the site of Sodom and Gomorrah may have actually been found, and I've gone on that before, but maybe whoever's hanging around here in Mars was throwing around some nukes a couple thousand years ago. Oh, really? Counter them myself. Yeah, sorry. Hindu Vedas, you have VS. Yes. Oh, man. Exactly. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, Joe. I didn't even see that. Yeah, we're on the same page, man. Same deal. We've seen the same stuff. We've watched the same episode of Ancient Aliens. No, I think more research than that, clearly, right? But yeah, it's very interesting stuff. Ancient Aliens, I might add, is a great repository for these kinds of anecdotes.
Chevrolet Silverado ZR2.
Here we go. He's starting. This is about We Are the Aliens, Life's Interstellar Journey to Earth. Oh, panspermia. Interdasting. Well, I'm going to arrange my thing and shrink it a little bit. Right about there. Put me over here. There we go. There. Good enough. Yeah. hope it gets crazier than that. I have a feeling it always inevitably with these guys and girls always get crazier than that.
Pretty interesting theory.
Oh, Joker, thanks for the follow, man. Appreciate it. This is such a sick intro. I guess it's a default one on YouTube. I don't even know that. Fucking YouTube coming in with like the fucking streaming resources here. Twitch is kind of dropping the ball a little bit on this shit.
This episode of The Y-Files is brought to you by The Y-Files Operation Podcast. Deep dives and longer stories every week. There are extraterrestrials among us. They landed 4 billion years ago when the Earth was just forming. And they weren't humanoids with tall, slender bodies and dark almond-shaped eyes. The aliens were microbes, and they were delivered here. And once these aliens awakened in our mineral-rich world, they multiplied quickly and evolved. If you want to see these aliens for yourself, it's actually pretty easy. Just look in the mirror.
Interesting. This is directed panspermia, to be more specific. Actually.
Until next time, be safe, be kind, and know that you are appreciated.
Sir, I'm gonna need you to come with us.
Okay.
Oh, they gotta stop showing the same ad over and over again.
Can anybody hear me?
Jesus Christ.
I don't know why I'm here.
Take off the pillowcase.
I'll turn this down slightly because I've seen this like 5 times now. Where's directed panspermia?
That's not your concern.
Okay.
We have been following your show.
The deliberate transport of microorganisms into space to be used as an introduced species on other astronomical objects. That is very interesting. The guy who came up with panspermia actually was kind of in support of this idea. I can find his name here.
Following your show.
No, I heard you. I just don't know what that means.
We have been following your show. He speaks English.
So that's a good question, though.
Your question is confusing.
No, it wasn't. It was someone else.
Yeah, it is. He's just playing dumb. You're dumb.
Well, if you know that I have more information, then you already know that what I know that you know.
Just tell us what we want to know.
Okay, what episode are you talking about?
What episode are we talking about? I don't know, dude. You're the researcher.
No, you're supposed to know this.
What the heck?
The one that
Has more information.
Look, guys, I have a podcast that covers all of this. The Wi-Fi's
Oh man,
Operation
they're
Podcast
reaching
comes
out.
every
He must be
week. On
making
Mondays,
a
we release
fucking
the YouTube
killing
episodes.
off this,
And then on
man.
Wednesdays,
How
we
many
do deep dives into
how
those
many
stories,
how many
and then we
followers do
cover
they have right now? Just a
unredacted
second.
topics that are a little too sensitive for YouTube.
Sorry, I'm just gonna close this for a second to see.
Yeah.
Where does this podcast air?
23,000 people watching, which is pretty fucking nuts. 3.28 million subscribers. Absolutely, though, yeah. No, they do a really good job with these. They've done a brilliant job. He was on Joe Rogan like fucking a long time ago with his brother, and they had this marijuana business. But I guess he's since gone over to this, but really great. It takes me back. He would have. He was on like Above Top Secret and Godlike Productions, and some of the stuff has been in regards to that, and it's been a throwback, definitely.
4 billion years ago, the Earth's surface was very different than it is today.
Oh, stop.
No continents existed. The entire planet was covered in ocean, but the waters were shallow, no more than 100 feet deep in most areas. Countless volcanoes covered the globe, spewing molten rock that would soon form tiny islands. The atmosphere was a heavy shroud of volcanic ash, superheated dust, and toxic gas. This was perfect for the large craft that had
It's
just
coming
entered
soon,
Earth's
Joker.
orbit.
I can feel
This
it.
craft was on a mission. On the vessel was a cargo chamber filled with row after row of large capsules, each about the size of a car. The capsules contain trillions of prokaryotes. Prokaryotes are single-celled organisms. They don't even have a nucleus. But these organisms carry something very important in each and every one of them: DNA. There was a loud hiss, a door opened, and a capsule was ejected toward the planet below. The vessel powered up its engines as soon as the payload entered the atmosphere. Moments later, the ship bolted out of the solar system and onto its next destination. The alien capsule glowed red hot as it pushed through the Earth's atmosphere. This wasn't a problem, it was designed for this. When the object hit the water, the impact was violent. This was also expected. The capsule opened. Out poured what looked like thousands of glass beads. Each of these beads contained millions of organisms. The ocean water dissolved the beads and released the organisms into the boiling seas. Most died immediately. This was also expected, but some survived. These pioneering organisms thrived in the depths of the ocean, around hydrothermal vents heated by the Earth's core. The organisms adapted, evolved, and diversified. This was the plan. And so the tiny planet Earth began its journey from a barren piece of lifeless rock to a vibrant oasis of life. The creators knew it would take a few billion years for intelligent life to evolve. This was all encoded in the DNA of those first microorganisms. The DNA was a program. The programmers knew that when their creations were finally ready, they'd decode the program and find a way to call home.
Interesting.
There is a growing group of scientists who believe life on Earth began from microbes delivered from space. This theory is called panspermia.
Yeah, spermia.
Please don't be immature. In Greek, pan means all and sperma means seed. Anyway, Svante Arrhenius was a major proponent of this theory. And when it came to biochemistry, he knew what he was talking about. It was 1908, and Arrhenius was a Nobel Prize-winning chemist working in Sweden. The accepted theory of life's origin is abiogenesis. This refers to the process where chemical reactions of inorganic material form organic material, which eventually becomes life. And this happened on Earth about 3.5 billion years ago. Arrhenius wasn't buying it. The ancient Greeks had a much simpler theory. They suggested the seeds of life were present everywhere in the universe. And they weren't talking about alien spacecraft dropping probes into primordial seas. They felt that bits of space dust contained seeds of life. The Greeks and Arrhenius believed that when the space dust arrived on Earth, it brought life with it. Then evolution took over and created millions of new species of plants and animals. But life coming from outer space is tricky. Even in its most basic form, it shouldn't be able to survive the harshness of space. So Arrhenius set to find out. He created extreme environments in a lab. He subjected living microorganisms to deadly cold temperatures, near 0 Kelvin. If these microbes were from space, they could handle it, because nothing else on Earth could handle 0 Kelvin. 0 Kelvin may not sound that cold, but it is. We're talking minus 459 degrees Fahrenheit. Basically the temperature of deep space.
Wow.
The microorganisms could not survive those temperatures. Arrhenius was disappointed. But then he slowly and carefully applied heat. Most microbes remained inert, but some, when reheated very carefully, activated again. They were alive. This shouldn't have happened. The ability to survive in minus 450 degree cold was not driven by natural selection in our terrestrial environment. These seem to be the abilities developed on another world. Arrhenius had discovered a new kind of life, which became known as extremophiles. Before Arrhenius, scientists didn't believe life could survive in Earth's most extreme environments. But as soon as they started looking, they found life was everywhere. Arrhenius had proved that life could survive the extreme cold of space. But what about extreme heat? In 1977, explorers discovered hydrothermal vents. They were on the ocean floor beneath the Galapagos Islands. These were cracks in the Earth's crust, where water, superheated by the planet's core, is released. Since that first discovery, scientists have found these hydrothermal vents all over the world. They're usually in underwater mountain ranges where tectonic plates collide. Now, humans can't survive very long in temperatures over about 122 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, proteins in our bodies start to melt. Our cells lose their shape. At over 158 degrees, our DNA begins to unravel.
Yeah, but nothing loosens up the muscles like a nice fin rub and a nice hot soak.
Well, maybe, but the water released at these hydrothermal vents is over 800 degrees. That would kill you, me, anything almost instantly. Yet here's the thing, that water is teeming with life. There are bacteria thriving in water at 220 degrees. Some can even survive in temperatures higher than that. These are called hypothermophiles. No one knows how their DNA keeps its shape at these extremes, but it does. And as you go deeper into the ocean, life faces another deadly problem: pressure. We don't really notice it, but our atmosphere is heavy enough to exert pressure on us. When you go underwater, the weight of the water does the same thing. Without protection, the human body can't survive for more than 5 or 6 atmospheres of pressure. But scientists have found organisms that thrive in 300 atmospheres. Pressure doesn't seem to affect them much at all. Now, how about this? There are organisms that can survive in acid too. pH stands for potential of hydrogen or power of hydrogen. pH ranges from 0 to 14. 7 is neutral, below 7 is acid, and above 7 is basic or alkaline. The human body likes a pH of 7, neutral, or maybe slightly above. We go below that, we're in trouble. We don't like acid.
Speak for yourself.
The pH scale is logarithmic, so a pH level of 6 is 10 times more acidic than neutral. A pH level of 5 is 100 times more acidic, and so on and so on. Exposure to acid is very bad for humans. It's bad for almost every living thing on Earth. Almost every living thing. There are bacteria that live happily in sulfuric acid with a pH of 0.3. That is 5 million times more acidic than human blood. Even in those extreme conditions, life exists. Now, what about oxygen? Before beaming down, it's the first thing you check, right? Can we breathe out there? If there's no oxygen, the planet's not inhabitable. Life needs oxygen, but not all life. Some microbes called anaerobes convert carbonate, sulfate, or iron into energy. They don't need oxygen at all. So once scientists started looking, they realized extremophile microorganisms do more than exist. They're the most numerous life forms on Earth. But if panspermia is real, these extremophiles would have to withstand a trip through the harshest environment we know, space. And as soon as we had the technology to get these things into orbit, we did.
It reminds me of Spore. I love playing Spore, the video game.
Space is an environment more extreme than anything found on Earth. With no protection from the sun's radiation, temperatures can be over 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Pass into the Earth's shadow, hidden from the sun, suddenly it's minus 148 or lower. If temperature fluctuations don't kill you, radiation will do the trick. Radiation in space is strong enough to damage human cells and destroy DNA molecules.
Unless you're going to the moon, then for some reason radiation isn't a problem at all.
You're talking about going through the Van Allen belt?
Yes, the Van Allen belt. You know, the radiation around the planet that nobody can get through, which is why nobody went to the moon.
The Apollo spacecraft traveled through the Van Allen radiation belts at a very high speed, and the particles in the belt are spread very far apart, so the astronauts weren't exposed to much radiation.
What are you doing, PR for NASA now?
No, I'm just saying that even more dangerous than radiation is the vacuum itself. There's no atmosphere in space, and with no atmospheric pressure, the liquids in your body boil and vaporize. Saliva, tears, blood. Humans can't survive in space, but there are animals that can. In 2007, the European Space Agency sent 3,000 living tardigrades into orbit for 12 days. No one expected any to survive. How could they? They would have no shielding from the deadly radiation or the vacuum. Tardigrades are a bit more complex than typical microbes. These are microscopic animals with segmented bodies and 8 legs. They're commonly called water bears. Now that's a cute name for what's probably the toughest animal on Earth. Tardigrades can live at temperatures ranging from absolute 0 to boiling. They can survive pressure 6 times that of the ocean's deepest trenches. When the orbital mission returned, 68% of the tardigrades survived. The space vacuum and exposure to cosmic radiation were not a problem for the water bears. Some even went on to reproduce offspring more tolerant to radiation exposure.
That's insane.
Lichen is a unique form of life that represents a symbiotic relationship between 2 organisms, a fungus and photosynthetic bacteria. Other missions prove that lichen can also survive in space. And tardigrades, by the way, are most often found on lichen. Could an asteroid carrying lichen and tardigrades have seeded life on Earth? Well, it's been proven that they could survive the impact. If certain bacterial spores are shaded from direct sunlight and radiation, as they would be inside a meteor, they can survive in space for years. Yeah, but for bacteria to be transported across space, it would need to survive for millions of years, and that seems unlikely. But in 2020, scientists pulled a piece of sediment from the ocean floor. The rock was 20,000 feet down and over 100 million years old. They put it under a microscope. The rock was full of microbial fossils. They looked more closely. Those aren't the fossils of microbes, they're actual microbes. 100 million year old microbes, various types of bacteria. They appeared to be in a type of suspended animation. So the scientists wondered if they could—
Oh, don't tell me they tried to revive them.
They tried to revive them.
Oh no, they didn't wake up, did they?
They woke up.
No! What year was this?
2020.
In 2020, eggheads are pulling 100-million-year-old bacteria from the bottom of the ocean and waking them up. Hello, turn on the news, you morons.
We must
Not only did
explore.
the bacteria wake up, they had a 99.1 success rate, and they started multiplying immediately.
And there it is.
Well, there were about 100 cells per cubic centimeter at the beginning of the experiment. 68 days later, there were 1 million cells per centimeter.
Oh, great. Next thing you know, we'll need 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Not now. Okay, so this experiment proved that bacteria can survive dormant for long enough to travel to other planets. That was shocking, but we already knew life existed on Earth 100 million years ago. That doesn't prove it came from outer space. Now, mainstream science agrees we are surrounded by creatures that seem alien in their abilities. But the mainstream view is that life started on Earth from nothing, abiogenesis. The earliest evidence of microbial life dates back to 3.5 billion years. At this time, the Earth had oceans of water and plenty of organic matter. This is known as the primordial soup. That soup had all the ingredients of life.
Beef stock and mirepoix?
Mirepoix?
Carrots, onions, celery.
I know what mirepoix is. The ingredients were water, amino acids, organic gases, and some minerals. And that was the prevailing theory for a long time. Before 3.5 billion years ago, there was no way the Earth could support life. The conditions were too harsh, and that was the theory for hundreds of years. But then that theory blew up when they found evidence of life in a rock much, much older.
Very interesting stuff to consider, you know.
Earth formed a little over 4.5 billion years ago in the Hadean Eon, named after Hades, the ancient Greek god of hell, because this time in history was hell on Earth. The planet had just started forming from interstellar gas and dust. The crust in the atmosphere didn't exist yet. The Earth was so hot that rocks couldn't solidify. This was not a habitable place. So it makes sense the first evidence of life was found in rocks from the second stage of Earth's geological timeline, the Archean Eon. This is when the Earth began to cool, a crust developed, and the oceans formed. The atmosphere was a combination of methane and ammonia, and the sun was only 75% as bright as today, but this was good enough for life to begin. We know because, amazingly, there are places on Earth where rocks still exist from that time. One of these places is the Isua Greenstone Belt in Greenland. This strip of volcanic rocks dates back 3.8 billion years, and geologists have found direct evidence of life there. Microbial colonies formed about 3.7 billion years ago. Fine, this proves what scientists suspected. Early life began in the Archean Eon, and not before. But some of the oldest rocks on Earth are found in the Jack Hills in Western Australia. Incredibly, you can stand on rock formed in the Hadean Eon, the time of hell on Earth before life even existed. However, scientists found something surprising when they studied zircon crystals from the area. Zircon is unique among all materials on Earth. Zircon grows in volcanic rock, and although the crystals are thinner than a human hair, they're nearly indestructible. Zircon even outlasts the rocks in which they're originally formed. Researchers have found zircons going back 4.4 billion years, pretty close to the actual birth of the planet. So the one thing scientists don't expect to find inside a 4.1 billion year old zircon crystal is the sign of life. Except that's exactly what they found. They found biogenic carbon with isotopic signatures matching organic matter. The zircon is 4.1 billion years old. This means life had to develop in the much harsher environment of the Hadean Eon before oceans and a stable atmosphere formed. At the same time, comets and meteors were constantly raining down on the planet. And panspermia says these meteors were bringing life with them. Lots of life. And for years, the theory of panspermia, that comets were the source of life, was marginalized. It was pseudoscience. The surface of the Earth was too hot. It was molten rock. Life can't survive that.
The conditions that would most likely to have prevailed near the impact-riddled Earth's surface 4.1 to 4.23 billion years ago were too hot even for simple organic molecules to survive, let alone evolve into living complexity. This leaves panspermia as the most plausible valid option for the origin of terrestrial life. The first microbes were most likely delivered to the planet along with impacting comets and meteorites.
But even if comets could somehow land on the Earth while it was forming, it wouldn't matter. Comets are just dirty snowballs, rocks made of ice and dust, maybe mixed with ammonia, methane, and carbon dioxide. There was no way a comet could contain organic material. But eventually we developed the technology to send probes to comets and test their chemical makeup. And then all those wacky pseudoscience panspermia believers, well, they started looking pretty smart.
Is it zirconium crystals? I'll have to get some for this.
Sir Fred Hoyle was an English astronomer who developed the theory of stellar nucleosynthesis.
Fuck yeah.
This theory says that all the elements from which our world is made have been cooked inside stars. Everything from carbon to uranium atoms were generated eons ago from a star's power source, helium. These heavy elements were then blasted into space in great stellar explosions called supernova, where they later solidified into planets, mountains, humans, and everything. Hoyle is the man who discovered we're all made of stardust. Hoyle was also a believer in the panspermia theory. He was convinced comets had been delivering microorganisms to Earth since its formation. In 1978, he published the book Life Cloud, arguing that comets were the incubators of life and the stork that first carried life to Earth. Now, this was considered a fringe idea, not accepted by mainstream science. Hoyle's stubborn refusal to accept that the origin of life happened on Earth and instead was delivered by comets made him an intellectual outlaw in his field. But then...
Top. Ignition. Ariane first stage ignition and take off.
We expanded our perspective.
Take off, band. Décollage.
In 1986, the European Space Agency's Giotto mission got a probe within 370 miles of Halley's Comet. That probe was able to analyze the chemistry of the comet. It was made up of mostly water, some carbon monoxide, a little bit of ammonia and methane, and this was expected. But what was unexpected was that the comet also contained hydrogen cyanide, a precursor to amino acids, which are necessary to form life. The Giotto mission also detected the presence of so-called CHON particles, C-H-O-N, named because they're rich in carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. This was more evidence that comets really were transporting life's ingredients across the stars. Space agencies worldwide combined for 12 more missions to examine comets up close. They discovered even more complex organic molecules, such as ethanol, formaldehyde, glycolaldehyde, and acetaldehyde. Hoyle passed away in 2001, but he lived long enough to review the data from those space probes. He knew he was on the right track. Comets delivered the elements necessary for life. If he had lived just 3 more years, he would have been amazed. In 2004, for the first time in history, we didn't just pass by a comet, we landed on one. And then the theory of panspermia, which sounds a lot like science fiction, started to sound a lot like science fact.
That's how it happens, right? Trailblazers, having the courage
In
to go against the grain.
2004, the European Space Agency sent the Rosetta probe to visit Comet 67P. And this time, it carried a robotic lander that explored the comet's surface. The probe spent 786 days in space and traveled 4.8 billion miles. The mission revealed the comet had primitive water ice formed 4.5 billion years earlier. Comet 67P contained a mix of compounds, including ammonium salts. Ammonium salts are thought to be one of the precursors to life. They can later form more complex molecules like amino acids. This was an exciting discovery. But then things got even more interesting. Samples of the comet were brought back to Earth and analyzed. Not only did they confirm ammonium salts were present, but they also discovered the presence of the amino acid glycine. Scientists had officially found a fundamental building block of life on a comet. And there are thousands of comets zipping around our solar system. And we now know they contain organic molecules. But thousands of comets doesn't even begin to describe how many objects there are out there. Surrounding our solar system is a vast area called the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is so large that the outer edge reaches almost a quarter of the way to the nearest star.
There you go.
It's staggeringly big, and it contains trillions of objects. Trillions. And these objects were even more common in the early solar system when they were busy delivering water to create Earth's oceans and delivering the building blocks of life itself. The more evidence we collect, the more likely Hoyle's bold theory of panspermia sounds like the truth. But this is accidental panspermia. The more controversial theory is directed panspermia. Directed panspermia suggests that an advanced extraterrestrial civilization purposely seeded life on Earth. And maybe they did, but it seems as if the aliens had a backup plan in case their first attempt at seeding life on Earth didn't take. So, about 540 million years ago, a rock landed on Earth that contained more than a few microbes. The rock contained eggs.
Yeah, Will, it's like insecurity, I think, Will. People that
Panspermia might not have been a single event 4 billion years ago. Large comets and asteroids only hit the Earth every few million years, but small meteorites hit the Earth by the thousands every year. We've established that life has been on Earth for a long time, and there's debate about whether it began 3 billion years ago or 4 billion years ago. But there's no debate that something very strange happened on Earth 540 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion. Before the Cambrian period, life on Earth was microscopic. Single-celled organisms like bacteria were the most common form of life. A few very simple multicellular organisms evolved, but even over a few billion years, life didn't become much more advanced. Then suddenly, boom, the Cambrian explosion. Out of nowhere, there was a rapid increase in the diversity and complexity of life, especially in multicellular organisms. This event drastically altered the course of evolution and shaped the modern biosphere. Now, there are a few theories on why evolution suddenly began escalating.
Aliens.
Rising oxygen levels could have allowed for more complex metabolisms.
Nope.
Or the end of an ice age could have made the oceans more survivable.
Nope.
But in 2018, a new theory was proposed. A team of 33 researchers published a paper in a peer-reviewed scientific journal that was interesting. It was titled, "Cause of the Cambrian Explosion, Terrestrial or Cosmic?" 540 million years ago, meteors landed containing biomatter that was more complex than microbes or amino acids. These meteors had eggs from a new species frozen in the icy center of the rock. That species exists to this day and is different than any other animal found on Earth. The creature has 3 hearts, a body that can change its shape, texture, and color at will. It has the brain power to use tools. It can easily navigate complex mazes. Now, you've seen this highly adaptable and highly intelligent alien species, the octopus.
Octopi.
An octopus has camera-like eyes with an iris, a circular lens, and photoreceptor cells. It has 500 million neurons, more than most other mammals. And unlike other mammals, most octopus neurons lie outside the central brain. 2/3 of its neurons are in its arms. This results in the arms being able to act like independent animals. Each arm is capable of touch and taste. They can move separately and can grasp objects even after being severed from the main body. And if an octopus arm is severed, no problem. It grows a new one in its place, completely indistinguishable from the first. These characteristics, the large, non-centralized brain, the ability to camouflage itself, and the flexible bodies appeared suddenly on the evolutionary timeline. Now, when scientists examined the genes of the octopus, the true alien nature revealed itself. The octopus genome shows staggering complexity. It has 33,000 protein-coding genes. That's 10,000 more than humans. Now, the octopus is said to have evolved from nautiloids like clams and oysters, but those are nothing like the octopus at all. This mysterious leap can only be explained by
aliens.
Yep, extraterrestrial intervention.
Man, fucking
Exchanges of rock between planets in our own solar system like Earth and Mars is a fact, and quite common. We've found Mars rocks here, and it's safe to assume there are Earth rocks on Mars. If biomatter hitched a ride on those rocks, and the conditions were right, life would evolve. Mars was once very Earth-like, with a stable climate and lots of surface water. If microbes evolved there, they very well could have ended up here. In 1996, a meteorite from Mars was examined under a microscope. It appeared to contain fossilized microbes. It's a controversial claim, but with what we now know about comets, life on Mars seems very plausible.
Today, Rock 84001 speaks to us across all those billions of years and millions of miles. It speaks of the possibility of life. If this discovery is confirmed, it will surely be one of the most stunning insights into our universe that science has ever uncovered. Its implications are as far-reaching and awe-inspiring as can be imagined.
What?
Bill looked like he pulled an all-nighter on the Lolita Express there.
I would never joke about the Clintons.
Yeah, but when we're off camera, you joke about the Clintons all the time.
I never joke about the Clintons ever.
You've made quite a few...
Can we move on, please?
Fine.
Jesus Christ.
If life evolved in our solar system, then chances are it's going to be found everywhere where the conditions exist to support it. Mars has water ice, and once had a vast ocean just like Earth. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, has liquid ocean under its icy shell. Jupiter's gravity causes tidal forces on Europa that create heat. Enceladus, a moon of Saturn, also has a subsurface ocean. Plumes of water vapor and ice particles, including organic compounds, have been detected erupting from cracks in the moon's surface. Titan, another of Saturn's moons, has a dense atmosphere and stable liquid on the surface. Now, it's liquid methane, not water, but life could evolve there. Recent studies show Venus could support microbial life in the upper layers of its atmosphere. And Ceres, a dwarf planet in the asteroid belt, has water ice, and there's evidence of liquid salt water below the surface. And these are places right here in our solar system. But if we look further out, the chances of life increase tremendously. The number of potential Earth-like planets in our galaxy is about 100 billion. And there are about 100 billion other galaxies out there. So the total number of planets that could support life is incomprehensible. And with all the comets and asteroids flying around our galaxy carrying the seeds of life, panspermia doesn't sound like pseudoscience. In fact, life being delivered here via panspermia is the only theory, to me, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it seems pretty logical.
Life not arising on Earth, but arriving on Earth. It's a fascinating theory, but is it true? Well, a couple of factors make seeding life on Earth a challenge. The time required for biologically active rocks to be ejected from a solar system is probably the biggest obstacle. It could take between 4 and 50 million years for rocks to break from a planet and leave the solar system. But If a planet is hit with a big enough object, like the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, it can throw a rock into orbit in an instant. In the early solar system, giant impacts like this were happening all the time on every planet. But life finding its way here from another star, that's a long shot. Not impossible, but very difficult. But life finding its way here from Mars or Venus, that's no problem at all. Another issue though, no matter the distance traveled, the biological matter has to stay viable for the journey for millions or billions of years. And the size of the rock really matters. We know that bacteria and even more complex forms of life can stay dormant for many years, but that doesn't do you any good if your rock vaporizes when hitting the Earth's atmosphere. You're gonna need a pretty big rock to get through. Again, not impossible, but not easy, unless you adopt the theory of direct panspermia, which answers all these concerns. The discovery of the structure of DNA is credited to James Watson and Francis Crick, so reputable and respected scientists. In 1971, they spoke at a conference on communication with extraterrestrial intelligence organized by Carl Sagan. They claimed organisms were deliberately transmitted directly to the Earth by intelligent beings from another planet. No randomness was involved. The seeds of life made it here because this is where they were sent. Simple enough, but in the end, panspermia means that we're not from here. And you'd think, like the octopus, there'd be evidence within us that maybe the Earth isn't our original home. Well, Francis Crick actually suggested there is evidence. In 1973, he published a paper with Leslie Orgel, a molecular biologist. The paper was called Directed Panspermia. The paper says that the chemical composition of living organisms, and I quote, must reflect to some extent the composition of the environment in which they evolved. The paper makes the point that human beings have a trace element in their bodies called molybdenum, which is crucial to organic processes. But here's the thing, molybdenum is pretty rare on Earth, but you know what's a great source of it? Meteorites. So maybe somewhere out there is our home planet, where molybdenum is plentiful, and the fact that we can survive on Earth makes us another extremophile. The idea that the Earth was seeded with life makes more sense to me than life spontaneously emerging from organic compounds in a primordial soup. I like the idea of a galaxy teeming with life. I like believing that we're not the children of the Earth, but the children of the universe. But whether life started here or somewhere far, far away, it did start somewhere. So my question is, who started it?
Now we know who started it, right? The A's.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name is AJ, that's Hecklefish.
I have no jokes about the Clintons.
This has been the Y-Files. If you had fun or learned anything, do him a favor.
Yeah, panspermia is a cool one. I don't know. I mean, obviously less controversial than aliens should pick people up in their ships and we're going for joyrides, hanging out with them, right? Like that's a little more of a grounded, you know, theory. Directed panspermia. It's interesting, definitely. I mean, the question is, would they then go around and start directing evolution once it crops up on the planet? It would make sense, though. Like, you know, it'd be one way. But the question is, like, well, when did all life start in the universe? And what put the system of DNA into place as well, right? Like I wanted to talk to some molecular biologists about this at some point, like their opinion on the system of DNA, what the system might represent, like how the system came about, like if it's something that maybe even predates the Earth, that'd be interesting, honestly, or if it's like, but the mechanism, like the system cropping up in the first place, like how that came about, it's very interesting. Probably starts to dig into like source code stuff a little bit. Like I know some people in physics that propose that idea, like a simulation theory. I find so tantalizing, right? To corroborate all the woo. That's the dream. To piece it all together, you know? Destroy ourselves and nukes so high-tech alien race use asteroids to make habitable planets habitable. Maybe that's, well, that'd be kind of trippy, wouldn't it? We're destined to fail then, Zach? Is that what you're trying to say? They programmed failure into us. It's an inevitability that we'll enter into a giant war. Hopefully it doesn't start tonight. I know 900 you're in here fucking saying that there was some shit going on, but fingies crossed that things don't go completely to shit tonight, at least, right? We'll hang in there for another day and another dollar, you know. But for everybody, thank you for hanging out this evening. Thank you for coming around. That's probably where this night will end for me, at least. But hopefully the day continues tomorrow. And yeah, we will then, after that, see everybody on the next episode. I am going to try and do something this weekend here. So, yeah, we'll do that. The Lee Cronin paper. Yeah. I'll maybe that's what I'll look that up. What is that damn link? I'm not familiar. I'll have to check it out. But yes, everybody. And for everybody watching the VODs, thank you again. And for everybody here, once again, thank you for coming. And I will leave everyone again on a Jim Russell AI song, thanks to Divinormous. So until next time, everyone, take care and peace.
Streaming through the digital night, Jim Russell, he's guiding the light, unveiling mysteries of the unknown, UFOs in the alien zone. He's a man on a mission, exploring ancient secrets, it's his addiction, debating, discussing with his loyal crew, cosmic conversations, unveiling the truth.